In this video, we are going to be talking about the trace mineral iron. We're going to start by talking about iron absorption and different types of iron in food. Iron absorption is regulated and dependent on a person's iron status. So the body can increase or decrease absorption of iron depending on need. For example, in pregnancy, there is a higher need for iron, and the body can increase absorption of iron from food. Now, on average, about 10 to 15% of iron from food is absorbed. And interestingly, there's really no mechanism for excreting iron from the body except for blood losses, with some small losses in the GI tract through feces. Now, absorption of iron is also affected by the type of iron in the food, and there are two types of iron. There's heme iron that we find in animal flesh, and there's non-heme iron that we find in plant products. And we're going to talk about that a little more in a bit here. But heme iron, for healthy people, they'll absorb about 23% of heme iron from food, where non-heme iron, the absorption is really variable, anywhere from like 2 to 20%. Now, we can also affect absorption by iron by the foods that we eat with our iron-containing food. So some foods increase absorption where other things can decrease absorption. So let's get into some details of food sources of iron and how they affect absorption. So as mentioned before, I talked about heme and non-heme iron. So heme iron is the type of iron that is found in animal flesh. So heme iron is only found in animal flesh, like chicken, fish, beef, poultry, pork, you get it. And the darker the meat, the more iron there is. So a red meat like steak or liver or beef is going to have more iron than a lighter colored meat such as chicken. Now, non-heme iron is our other type of iron that's not as well absorbed, and we find it in plant products, and it's also found in animal products. But plant products only contain non-heme. So animal flesh contains heme and non-heme, where plant products only contain non-heme. So good sources of non-heme would be fortified cereals or grains. There's also small amounts in vegetables and in legumes. So heme iron we find in animal flesh, non-heme in plant products like fortified cereals and grains, vegetables, and legumes. So let's talk about why do we have a decreasing amount in non-heme and heme? Well, there is a difference in absorption because we have different things that can affect absorption. For example, we have what are called oxalates, and you find this in spinach and some vegetables, and the oxalate inhibits the absorption of iron. Or in legumes and whole grains, we have what's called phytates. They also inhibit the absorption of iron. So you see that we don't get as much iron absorption when we have foods with oxalate or foods with phytates. Now, things that you eat with iron-containing foods can also affect absorption. For example, calcium and iron, they affect each other's absorption. So if you take a calcium supplement or you're consuming a food high in calcium, at the same time you're consuming a non-heme iron food, that is going to compete for absorption. So like the milk on your cereal in the morning can impact the absorption of iron. And the tannins in teas can also decrease absorption of iron. So what can you do? Are there ways you can increase non-heme iron absorption? And the answer is yes. You can eat non-heme iron-containing foods with other foods that will increase absorption. For example, vitamin C increases absorption. So if you're having your cereal in the morning and it's fortified with iron and you have it with a cup of orange juice, vitamin C in the orange juice will increase the absorption of the non-heme iron. You can also cook iron-containing foods in a cast iron skillet. And the iron from the cast iron will actually sort of like leak into your food, if you will, and increase iron and iron absorption. You can also consume the non-heme iron-containing food with something that's acidic. So a good example would be an iron-containing pasta, and you serve it with a marinara sauce, like a tomato sauce. And that tomato sauce is acidic, and that increases the absorption of iron. Tomatoes are also high in vitamin C, so you have both vitamin C and acidic in this example here. And the last thing is to eat the iron-containing food, the non-heme iron, with meat, fish, or poultry. So with that heme iron, that increases the absorption. So a good example would be making a stir fry. We've got some non-heme iron in the vegetables and in the rice. And if I add shrimp to that, like you're seeing in the picture, or chicken or beef, that increases iron absorption. Okay, let's talk about the functions of iron. And the main function of iron is to transport oxygen to cells and to remove carbon dioxide from cells. And it does this because iron is part of two proteins. One is called hemoglobin, which is an iron-containing protein found in red blood cells. And the iron easily combines with oxygen and takes that oxygen to the cells and then picks up carbon dioxide for removal. The other protein is called myoglobin. It's an iron-containing protein found in the muscle, and it stores oxygen for future needs. Now, if you don't get enough iron, you can get what is called iron deficiency anemia. Now, with iron deficiency anemia, you can't make enough hemoglobin to fill your new red blood cells. So on the left, you're seeing a healthy red blood cell. On the right, you're seeing blood cells from somebody who has anemia. You can see that these red blood cells are lighter in color, they're lighter red, and they're smaller, and that is iron deficiency anemia. Now, if you think about the main function of iron as carrying oxygen, you can probably guess what some symptoms of iron deficiency anemia would be, but let's talk about them. So one of the first symptoms is a person with iron deficiency anemia will be weak, tired, fatigued, and that's because cells aren't getting sufficient oxygen. We'll also see rapid heart rate as the body is trying to move oxygen to the cells, is saying, hey, I need to get more red blood cells out to the cells. It increases the heart rate to do that. People will be pale because those red blood cells are paler and smaller. They actually look more pale. People will get a headache or have short attention span. They can't concentrate. It decreases work capacity because I'm not getting oxygen that I need to my brain. Of course, I'm going to have a headache and short attention span. Iron deficiency anemia can also lead to poor appetite. And interestingly, you can be more susceptible to infection. And some people develop what we call pica. This is a desire to eat non-food items. Example will be like chewing on ice, or in some cases, people will chew on dirt or even laundry detergent. And in children, they can develop poor cognition and poor mental development if they have iron deficiency anemia. Now, there are certain groups who are at higher risk for iron deficiency anemia, and that is women who menstruate. And because the only real way that we lose iron is through blood loss, and women have blood loss every month through menses, it puts them at higher risk for iron deficiency anemia. You can also get too much iron because iron is not excreted well in the body, and it can deposit in tissues and cause damage. One of the places where it can cause damage is when you consume amounts of iron way above the upper limit. That can cause damage to the lining of the small intestine and cause irritation.